What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Louis Ezekiel. Joining me tonight, my friend and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing this fine Thursday evening? How's your match going in Cupfall?
That's an interesting week. It's every person I was contemplating on cutting actually has scored a point. I got Suzuki, Bunting, Ehlers, all the riffraff on my team are starting to show up. I think they started to hear my thoughts and are trying to stay on the team.
Yeah, for sure. They don't want to get sent to the waiver wire like we've seen a number of players get over the last few days in the real NHL. I'm having some regrets. I've got a few here today. I failed to start Tristan Jarry. I was at my son's last soccer game of the season, and it was a real thriller. And I did not go ahead and swap Jarry in for Husso, who was not playing. He has just completed a 31 save shutout of Colorado. Way to go, Tristan Jarry, but a little sad that it's happening on the bench. It's not going to affect the outcome of my match, I don't think, but, you know, for tiebreaker purposes and all that, I certainly would have liked to see that go another way. But, you know, that's how it goes. I was trying to stay off my phone at my kid's sporting event, so I think I made the right choice, but hurts a little bit to see that awesome start go wasted. 15.3 cupful points. But we are not here to bellyache over my players that I sat. We are here to help our listeners tilt the ice in their advantage in their fantasy hockey matches, like the way the ice was tilted in the New Jersey-Washington game, where all 10 goals were scored in the same end of the ice. A real thriller. Probably not the game that New Jersey fans were looking for, but it was nice to see Washington start to look like their old selves a little bit. Are you ready to jump into the news here, bud?
Let's go.
All right. We're going to start off with news out of Ottawa. If you were following the saga of Shane Pinto's lack of a contract, this news is brought to you by FanGamble and BetKings. Pinto has been suspended 41 games for sports betting unrelated to the NHL, so half an NHL season. Lots of people talking about the fact that, if he had been betting on the NHL itself, probably would have been a much harsher penalty. Seems a little bizarre just given the way the, NHL has really leaned into advertising with betting services. I mean, hell, he has Betway ads on the side of his helmet, as do all the Ottawa Senators. So I hope he was at least using Betway when he went ahead and made this an issue. Maybe not a huge fantasy problem, unless ultimately we see Josh Norris injured again. Obviously, while Norris was out, Pinto kind of became more of a household name last season, putting together some nice fantasy efforts. But obviously, we are going to be missing him for quite a long period of time, and really not a whole lot that can be done about that, except maybe some grumbling about the way the NHL is conducting itself. But what else is new in that regard? Did you have anything that you wanted to add on with this silly Pinto news, or do you want to just move on to the next item?
One small thing to add is that this just kind of adds to the woes of whoever's the random winger that lives onto the third line on even strength, because there was always that hope of that Pinto would come back, that they would have three serviceable centers. I forget who's playing center now, but now that we could just say for sure that Pinto's not around, that whoever's left out of the top six is for sure going to be in a position to not really have let's just say a known center mate that will help them move along at even strength.
Yeah, good point there. It definitely hurts the depth. Obviously, we've seen teams that have struggled with their centers not be especially successful, so that may be of some concern. But I agree overall. Maybe not a huge fantasy issue for as long as our guy Josh Norris is able to remain healthy, which is not often all that long. So might be something worth keeping an eye on. May have an effect on us down the line. Not a whole lot of news regarding Connor McDavid. Still on that 1 to 2 week timeline, and we are, getting through that first week. So hopefully McDavid owners will get to see him sooner rather than later. We did get a few deployment ideas. They are keeping the same deployment for Thursday night's game with the Rangers as they had for their last game. That's Kane, Draisaitl, and Janmark on the top line, and a top power play of Kane, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman, Draisaitl, and Bouchard. So basically, a little bit of a shuffle there. Notable, definitely, to see Connor Brown move down. You actually had an interesting tidbit about his contract, I thought, that you shared with us in the chat, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like, with Edmonton at the top of the cap, that they have to do any shenanigans to get anything through. So what they did with the contract is that the contract itself, the year-to-year payment, is like year league minimum. But what happens is, I believe it's 10 games. He gets like a $2 million performance bonus. And I'm not really sure about how the cap works, but the person that posted this suggested that if he continues not to play well, or at least be of service up to that 10 games, it's almost, think of it as, your rookies having that tryout, that if he doesn't perform to that point, that they might just be promoted to waive him to avoid having that and affect the cap. I believe it would be next year that would affect them, but they have incentive to pull the plug early on if he doesn't perform, which by the looks of it, he's not.
Yeah, he's down on the third line with Holloway and McLeod. Obviously not a great place to perform. We are continuing the curse of the McDavid third wheel, right? No one remembers. I will give $1 to anyone who tells me where Ty Ratty is right now without looking it up. We just see this all the time, is that people can't seem to hang in that spot and be productive. So we did see Kane register a goal and an assist last game, so maybe he's snapping out of his funk a little bit and enjoying being on the top power play and up there with Draisaitl. So that's nice to see. Other than that, though, not a whole lot of movement, but we'll keep you informed.
One thing to add, and it's no surprising of just how well Draisaitl is, but I saw a stat this morning that Draisaitl is averaging over a point per game anytime McDavid's out. I believe it's like 51 points in 50 games. So while obviously Draisaitl's good, that is nice to know that with Kane and Janmark, they're in a position to actually feed off of that as well. So while obviously it does hurt to be without McDavid, that Kane and Janmark, if you're in a deeper league talking with Janmark, that there is still value of being with Draisaitl.
So if I'm enjoying this week of not having to face Connor McDavid, really lucked out with that. My poor opponent also has Rasmus Anderson, who got suspended for the week. But I should be hoping that McDavid is back for next week when I play the Draisaitl owner, so that he's not still going mad. Is that basically the idea here?
Yeah, it's a game of squares that you're shuffling around there.
Yeah, good point. All right, you've got updates on 3 players who are potentially close to returning. Why don't you run through those for us, Shams?
First is that Buchnevich is back, and this is his second game. The interesting thing to keep in mind now is that originally before his injury he was on the first line. However, he's now on the second line with Shen and Kasperi Kapanen. But while he's there, he's still back onto the top power play, which is all stacked, not like the old years where they would have that weird 50-50. And in the prior game, he did get a power play goal there. So while you're going to be playing your Buchnevich, hopefully the idea will be is that having that extra offensive power play or just offensive skill in general will help the kind of lackluster point totals you're seeing from the rest of the people there.
Yeah, really interesting. We talked a little bit, I think, in the summer about how we might potentially see a little bit more productivity out of our guys from the Blues, just because those who end up on the top power play were more likely to have like a real top power play instead of the funky split that they've been doing. And since the Blues have so much less depth this year compared to last year, I think that is, to see that coming to fruition, I think is pretty valuable and pretty interesting. So appreciate that update. Who else is making their way back to their lineup sooner rather than later?
So fingers crossed, I'd say while he's not playing today, there is a chance that Svechnikov is playing. because we're now at the part where they're actually announcing which games he's not playing. So it's close. And the interesting thing is while he was not playing today, he did actually practice on the top power play, and notably, and I believe he's not even playing on it today without Svechnikov, is that Bunting is now off that top power play. It's D'Angelo, which is notable in its own right, Svechnikov, Aho, Teravainen, and then Jarvis is the fifth player. So while he's not playing yet, that is a viewpoint to start thinking about, even with the assist that he has today, that Bunting's days on top line, top power play are numbered, and he's already on the second line as well right now without Svechnikov. So he might be still decent to be around while he's still scoring, but I would be having him as a player that I'm definitely keeping on my team.
Yeah, I think you got to shorten your bench a little bit when it comes to Michael Bunting. Great point there. And then the last cornerstone out in Vegas, potentially making a comeback maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, Pietrangelo, it's basically the way it was read was that he's likely back tomorrow. So I would go with the expectation that he is playing likely. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that, and things can change. We haven't seen actual practices and whatnot with him on the ice for power plays. But the important thing to keep in mind is that while he was healthy the first few games, is that Shea Theodore was playing power play one. So unless they had an idea change or they're not liking how he was playing currently, I would be up the expectation, even though that Pietrangelo is back, that Shea Theodore's power play one is safe. Now, if you want to get cheeky, maybe that's a chance that you can, I'm not this kind of player, but if you're that person that likes to throw at trades, maybe this is a situation where you can kind of poke the Theodore owner and then see if you can maybe juice something out that wouldn't happen anyway.
Yeah, not a bad idea, and the nice thing about Pietrangelo too is he's usually been able to be productive regardless of whether Theodore is on that top power play or not. Theodore, by the way, had a very nice goal to win the game in overtime on, I want to say, Tuesday. So some cool stuff there. Two other bits of headline news. We got to talk about Ryan Hartman, bench king, a guy who had 2 points in 5 games leading up to Frozen Frenzy and led to a lot of people benching him because they had full lineups. Went absolutely ham, 3 goals, 2 assists. Just a mountain of cupful points. Again, one that I would really I'm up to like 55 bench points this week. But in the end, it looks like it's not going to matter too much. Everybody's got a lot of bench points just because of the nature of that big Tuesday. But yeah, good news, I think, for the people who have Hartman, who's on a great top line, even if he's not getting the power play deployment. And not that you would necessarily expect him to, but do it on a not so busy night, buddy. We would love to have you in the lineup for some of this production. One other player that we wanted to talk about, who just has been a bit of an enigma this season, is Morgan Rielly. And as you pointed out in the chat, every time we bring him up on a show about what we want to do with him, he goes ahead and scores a goal. So we've done it twice. He got his second goal today. But he's not getting that power play one time. That's mostly going to John Klingberg. But he's still been very successful. I don't know. I don't have his exact points off the top of my head, but I think he's got something like 5 points in 6 games or 7 games or something like that. So, performing quite nicely. Are you worried about the fact that he doesn't have this power play time? Obviously the Leafs are a team that's capable of scoring. Do you just let it ride and, see what he can produce for you? I think I'm of a mind where, kind of like a Ryan Hartman potentially, or an Alex Pietrangelo for that matter. I feel like they all kind of fall into the same category where maybe they're not that first line guy, but certainly they're capable of production and they're on quality teams. I think I'm into hanging on to Morgan Rielly.
Yeah, personally, Morgan Rielly was on my do not draft list because I didn't want to do this kind of dance. But for someone that drafted him, this is the kind of life that you have to live. So the way I look at it is that he's scoring, he's getting you your points. He is now, even though he's not power play one, there's no shame in talking about just being there on even strengths with they're stacked forwards. So he is going to follow the points even off a power play. So this is going to be the kind of defenseman that I hate, that he's not going to get you the much bagger stats, and you're just going to have to cross your fingers that he gets points. Now, maybe if you're in a league that is not so bagger focused or that cares about shots, he might be a little bit more appetizing there, because there are those leagues. I'm not in any of them. But for your ones that have the peripheral stats, I feel like this is just going to be one of those things, is that kind of ride, and then once it starts cooling off. Now, I'm a little bit ruthless with my defensemen, that if you're not getting me points or you're not being the big bagger, I like to cycle them out. Maybe you're not going to be of that heart, but I would be contemplating throwing off to the waiver wire for someone else if there's interesting once those points go away. But right now, he's scoring. Might as well just count your lucky stars, as well as they last.
Yeah, right on. All right, cool. Let's head into our injuries and outjuries section. Yeah, we mentioned some people who might be coming out soon, but these are sort of the new news that we have. Brett Pesce is going to be out for 1 to 2 weeks, it looks like, with an injury. Only notable, I think, because he is a guy who has taken on around 50% of the shorthanded time for Carolina, and we've talked about Carolina's power kill and how they've been quite successful shorthanded. So that time has, for the most part, gone to Brady Shea, who's been over 50% shorthanded time on ice for the last few games, while Pesce has been out. Shea put up an assist and 3 shots, 2 blocks today. So, continuing kind of, he had a bit of a cool down, for 3 games, after his really hot start. But he's back on the scoreboard, and definitely a guy, that if you are, if shorthand points are a category, or if they have some extra value in your league, and they're worth more than ever in the cupful this year with an additional bonus point. So that's why it's something that's kind of on my radar. He's a guy who could be interesting, who's going to be out there a little bit more. I also appreciate him as a guy who is going gray before his time. Those of us who are in the chat room can see why I might be sympathetic to a guy who also started going gray in his 20s. So keep up the good work, Brady Shea. Love to see it. And yeah, could be an interesting option. I have like 0 defensive depth. I drafted 3 defensemen, and one of them was Montour, who's on IR. So I've been loving being able to fill in some of these Carolina defensemen. All right. We also have an injury update on one of the kind of sleeper, exciting rookie players. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with Devon Levi.
So the interesting thing here is that while Devon Levi got all the starts when he was healthy, the fact that they have 2 other goalies is rearing his head. So the way that Don Granato was talking is that, like, Levi seems it's not to be a serious injury. It sounds like he's just like sore and not 100%. And what they're doing is, just because he's not 100%, is that he is in a position to just rest him because he's happy with how Comrie and UPL are playing. So basically what's going to happen is that he's just going to be rested until that time. So, well, the nice thing is that while he's going to be staying on your IR to be able to sit there, is that it's going to be a while before he actually is put into a position to play, and is a hint of what could come into the future.
Yeah, so you might need to be hoping that, the other goalies go out and perform in such a way that Donnie Meatballs is getting frustrated with his players. Ideally, you get a couple bad starts from some of those guys, and suddenly that soreness starts to disappear, and Levi's doing well. But, it makes sense. You want to kind of manage his load. He's never started a full NHL season, so I can see why you might want to be cautious with the guy who you think might be your dude of the future. We also have some exciting news for the depth in Florida. We've seen Sam Reinhart going off. We've seen some success from Evan Rodriguez, of course. But they've got another weapon on his way back. Tell us a little bit about Sam Bennett, please, Shams.
So while not 100% confirmed that he's going to play the next game, they did say that he's going to be warming up, or at least testing it out. So hopefully he's in a position to play on Saturday. And then the really nice thing is that he did practice today, and the lines that they had were a stacked top 6. So you had the normal Reinhart, Barkov, Rodriguez line. And then for the second line, it's Verhaeghe, Bennett, and Tkachuk. So if we end up seeing Bennett play, he's going to be put into a position with strong line mates, and then that will be in a position to have that top six really shine.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely looking forward to that. That could be a really great spot for him to come back. I'm sure Bennett owners are champing at the bit to have him be out there potentially with Tkachuk and Verhaeghe. That top six looks so good in Florida. That's going to be really exciting to see how that develops. And then obviously once they get their rear guard back between Ekblad and Montour over the course of the next couple months, that's going to be a team to deal with, no doubt about it. All right, Shams, we have to head into a short break here. We will see you on the other side. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. We've got some hot and cold streaks for you here. We're going to start with some pointless players. And Shams, I'm going to ask you if you have any interest in any of these guys or if they should just be waiver fodder. Didn't pick everybody who's pointless on the young season. Obviously, there's a lot of those folks, but some names in particular that stood out to me as I looked through the list on Frozen Tools, a great resource to use, put up by the Dobber Hockey folks. Blake Wheeler, Barrett, Hayton, and Torey Krug stood out as some interesting players who have yet to score. Wheeler is playing as we speak, and Krug is also playing here on Thursday, so could be different by the time you hear from us, but at least as of now, these are pointless players. Do any of those three stand out to you? Obviously, Wheeler has had a great career, maybe, the greatest ever in the most recent edition of the Winnipeg Jets. Barrett Hayton, a guy that a lot of people had a lot of confidence in. Torey Krug getting a good chunk of the power play time for the Blues. These are guys who seem to, either have the skills or be in a position to maybe be successful. Obviously, Wheeler is on the wrong side of his aging curve. But do any of these guys stand out as someone who, you should be maybe knocking on the door to see if you can grab them for cheap? Are these guys that should just be hitting the waiver wire? Anybody stand out to you here who might be of interest?
For me, as the way I look at it is that Wheeler, I have zero interest in. I'm just not a fan of just having kind of a third wheel on, I think he's like on the third line. Krug, hopefully maybe with Buchnevich back, he might be getting some points on a power play or random things, but he hasn't really been performing, so I don't really have much interest in him. However, out of all these three, I'm actually pretty interested in Barrett Hayton, depending on if you're comfortable with rostering a straight centerman and can actually fit them into your schedule, is that while he hasn't had any points, he's top line, he's top power play. And the interesting thing to keep in mind is while he hasn't had any points, out of his 6 games, he has at least 4 shots in 4 of them. So, and then one of those is being a 5-shot game. And he had 23 minutes in his last game. So he's being put in those positions. He's taking the shots. So I don't have the XG in front of me, but you would think that over time that those shots will start turning into goals and then having that become something. So he might be a person that I would be considering, depending on the depth of your league, that I would consider trying to get, off the waiver wire or maybe trade on someone that's being annoyed by the lack of production.
Yeah, especially if it's on a team that's kind of struggling, and needs solutions now, who maybe might not be as inclined to sit around and wait to see if he can kind of pick things up. I like that idea too. He did score during Frozen Frenzy, but I think ultimately the goal was disallowed on an offside. So, I do think I'm with you. I think it's just a matter of time before he kind of breaks through. And obviously is in a great position to succeed. I think I'm a little more into Torey Krug than you, just because I do like, as we were kind of talking about, that the defense, that the power play for the Blues is a little bit more of a heavy power play one. So I think that's pretty appealing. But obviously, if he's not producing there, one game though, and he could be back to about a half point a game, which is sort of like your baseline. I think for some of these defenders, obviously you'd like to see it a little better, but he could turn things around here. So that's someone I would at least have my eye on. I'm with you that maybe it's not necessarily a sure thing that he's going to improve in that way, but I do like him as a potential option, just someone to keep an eye on, at least from my perspective, but I understand where you're coming from too. All right, let's jump on to another player who is continuing to score here tonight. The red hot Travis Sanheim. You have got the lead on this one, Shams. Tell us about what this dude is up to and why we should be running to potentially pick him up.
Yeah, so I don't think we've done this yet this season. This is a genuine stop the pod moment. If Travis Sanheim is available in your league and somehow, this is Yahoo, so it's always lower than it should be. He's currently only 21% rostered in Yahoo leagues, but Travis Sanheim has, out of all the 8 games he's played, he has scored at least an assist in 7 of them. And then I was going to say that he always scored or got assists. However, he's showing off today with a goal and 2 assists. I believe the game is close to being finished, but maybe something else will come in. And the nice thing is that he's blocking as well. And on top of this all is that I'm of the mind that the defender that gets your points and whatnot, it can dry up at any point. But the nice thing is with Sanheim, I don't think any of us was thinking of this. Everyone was thinking, Cam York is the offensive defenseman. He's going to have power play 1, and then Sanheim or a random person is going to have power play 2. Actually, it's Travis Sanheim playing on power play 1. And on top of it all, to close it out, is that Philly can actually score. It's with Couturier back, Konechny around, Cam Atkinson is playing. This is a much different team than last year. I'm not saying they're a playoff power play that's just going to come in and just wreck shop, but they are a serviceable team that will get their points, and then the defenseman alongside with them will have a point to kind of tag along with.
Yeah, absolutely. It is wild. The minutes are enormous. He's over 26 minutes in 4 of the games this season. Hasn't been below 23.58. So he's just getting a ton of ice time out there. His ownership increased 16% yesterday because people are into him, and that was even before the 1 goal, 2 assists. So please, if you hear this, on Friday morning, get out there and pick him up if he's available to you. I wish he was out there for me because he, will it stick around? Who knows? But he's giving you a nice peripheral floor. He's playing a ton of minutes. He's scoring. This is someone you got to go out and grab because that 21% rostered is sure to climb. And Philly has a near Streamagami next week. It's not perfect because Monday is one of the busy days, and I think he plays Friday, Saturday maybe, but that means if you needed to, you could dump him for a Sunday player. If you were desperate, I would find someone else maybe on the roster to drop. But Philly, definitely an interesting team for next week if you can find somebody to pick up. And yeah, Travis Sanheim, getting the short shifts bump here. He pointed on the last 2 goals that they scored while we were kind of getting ready to talk about him. So really outstanding work from Trav. All right, another hot player you want to watch out for, Ryan Johansson. Kind of a fantasy afterthought the last couple of years. Hasn't been kind of putting it together the way that we were hoping to see. Since I don't know, he had some hot moments as a Predator, but that seemed to be in the rear view. 5 points and 10 shots in the last 3 games. Obviously, the game has concluded on Thursday. No points, but that's because I accidentally benched Jari. So naturally, he was going to play out of his mind and shut out Colorado. He has over 6 minutes of power play time. Last I checked in today's game, and that was before the 3rd period. 29% rostered on Yahoo, but like Sanheim, saw a big jump yesterday with 17%. So that window is starting to close. Make sure you're running out and grabbing Ryan Johansson because that is a cheap way to get a piece of that lethal top power play. And his second line is not bad. It's nothing to sneeze at, even when they don't have the man advantage. And as long as we're talking about Joes, let's talk about one of the hottest players in fantasy hockey. We are not talking about the monkey villain from Powerpuff Girls. We are not talking about the titular figure of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. And really, we should be pronouncing it Yo-Yo, even though it's spelled JoJo. We are talking about Jonas Johansson. Had a bit of a rocky start. But the goalie that a Buffalo beat writer called the worst he's ever seen play at the NHL level has been absolutely red hot. 3 quality starts in a row, including a 32-save shutout on Frozen Frenzy Tuesday. He shut out the Hurricanes. A maybe less impressive shutout today against the lifeless San Jose Sharks squad, but back-to-back shutouts for JoJo or Yo-Yo if you prefer. Obviously, this guy's not a permanent solution with Vasilevsky coming back sometime next month, but at 62% rostered, that's a winning goalie on a great team who's available in a fair number of leagues. Ever since Stamkos came back from that injury, Tampa has been playing so much better. So I would use him while you can, even if you're just streaming him for a few games. He's starting almost all the games, really playing well. We were talking before we started and we were just kind of hanging out in the chat room here. I'm thinking about trying to move him if I can get if I can get my hands on maybe a reliable kind of secondary defender. I told people in my chat, I know where I drafted him. I drafted him in the last round. He was my Mr. Irrelevant. But he's looking pretty shiny with back-to-back shutouts. I'm looking to potentially deal him for a guy who I can get some long-term value from until, maybe someone I drop once I get, Brandon Montour back. But you were feeling like maybe I wasn't high enough on Johansson, right?
Yeah, because the way I look at it is I think is what you were saying before is that he's getting 7 cupful points a game when he's starting, and he's basically starting every single game, like excluding the back-to-backs. So that is a lot of points to be getting from a goalie. And then the nice thing is as you said, with the team firing on all cylinders, he's going to get those wins, which are big in our league, in the points leagues, and in your categories leagues. So I would be of the mind that unless you're getting someone back that would not be like basically someone that would stay on your roster the whole season. So like someone that's not streamer level or someone that's like a high variance player, someone that's actually like, okay, this player, like this defender you're going to have, he's going to be your defender 3 or your defender 2 for the whole season. I would ride the guaranteed points that I'm getting from Johansson, even though it's going to end at a point, than to pick up a random defender that could just start going cold by next week, and then you have nothing and you lost Johansson.
All right. Some interesting stuff to think about, because I was definitely ready to go here, and now I'm feeling more reticent. I take your advice very seriously because you're very good at what you do. So that's one of the reasons we love having you here on the show. And speaking of that show, Shams, we have reached the end of it. Another outstanding week here, sandwiched in between the Sunday mega shows. You got a patron cast show this week as well. Just all kinds of awesome content on the old Keeping Karlsson stream here for you. Thanks so much for joining me. Thank you for everybody who joined us on the Discord. A perk of being able to be there, and we will be making ourselves available on YouTube as well here shortly once John gets back and is ready to produce our digital media. But thanks everybody for joining us, whether you're listening live or listening on your podcast app of choice. Please be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. I've been quite active answering questions, just, making puns, joking around a little bit. Brian and Elon, of course, at Keeping Karlsson. Also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, at Game Day News NHL, and get Game Day Stats NHL, all organized nicely at GameDayTweets.com. Please visit that site and the other sites we research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, John Reed, as again, mentioning, we might as well bring him up a second time, our digital media producer. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.